12 Years Across Borders, a memoir by Ch.11, Chapter 11. From the corner of the exam room, before we begin, one note. What follows is a record of 12 years of work as a cross-border medical coordinator. It is a more not medical advice and not a treatment recommendation. If you or someone in your family is facing a similar situation, please speak with your own physician. Alright, let's begin. A note before you read this chapter. I am not a physician. I am not a nurse, not a pharmacist, not a researcher. For 12 years I stood in the corner of other people's exam rooms, translating what the doctor said into what the family could carry home. What follows is what I remember hearing. It is not medical advice. For any decision about your own treatment or family members, please speak to the physician who actually knows the case. Let me stop the clock for one chapter. The rest of this book moves forward in time to 2026, roughly in order. This chapter steps out of that line. It is a collection of questions families asked me over and over across 12 years, and the answers I happened to hear in the room when a doctor was patient enough to spell them out. Nothing here is my opinion. I do not have opinions worth writing down on medicine. What I have is a notebook and a long memory, and the thing a certain doctor said on a certain afternoon to a certain frightened wife. Another doctor, another day, another patient, and the words might be different. Medicine moves. 10 years ago's phrases are not today's phrases. Hold everything in this chapter loosely. I am writing it down only because it seemed unkind, after the 100th family asked, to keep pulling a busy oncologist aside to answer for the 100th and first time. The call usually begins the same way. The doctor in Taipei says there is only the standard treatment. Is there anything new in Japan? Anything experimental? Anything? In the room, one Fukuoka oncologist, a soft-spoken, middle-aged man who wrote his notes in very small handwriting. Answer that question like this. Standard is a bad translation. It makes people think it means ordinary. The word in English is standard of care. In the United States, they sometimes call it the gold standard. He wrote the English words in the margin of the chart for the daughter to see. It is not ordinary. It is the best evidence we currently have, built from trials on tens of thousands of patients across many countries over many years. The most trustworthy thing we know how to offer as of this morning. The daughter was quiet. So was I. I had been translating that phrase for almost a decade, and no one had ever slowed down to unpack it for me that way. The doctor kept going. There is something else you should know about the standard of care. It does not only treat the patient's body. It treats everyone around the patient. The cousin who read an article. The neighbor whose friend took a supplement. The mother-in-law who heard about a clinic in another city. When the family chooses the standard of care, they can answer all of those voices with one sentence. We are following the protocol our physician recommends, consistent with the international guidelines. That one sentence is a kind of armor. Without it, every well-meaning relative becomes a new source of doubt. I have thought about that sentence many times since. The standard of care is unfashionable on purpose. It is boring and slow, and it does not promise miracles. What it does is hold a family together while the patient goes through the worst year of their life. The second most common question by a wide margin, does immunotherapy work, Every oncologist I have translated for begins the answer the same way. It is almost a reflex. When you say immunotherapy, you are using one word for at least two different things. It matters which one you mean. The first family is the one that gets talked about at the university hospitals as the checkpoint inhibitors. Drugs with brand names like Opdivo and Keytruda. These are approved by the Japanese regulator, covered under the National Health Insurance for certain indications, and written into the society guidelines. They are not for every cancer. They are not for every patient. Whether a given patient will respond or not, the doctor will you clearly some do not, and the numbers are what they are. The specific percentage the doctor quoted that afternoon, years ago, is a number I have chosen not to write down here. It would be wrong for me, sitting at my desk in 2026, to put a figure into your head as if it applied to your mother in 2027. Ask your mother's oncologist. They will know today's number for today's indication. The second family is the one advertised at private clinics, autologous cell therapies. NK cells, dendritic cells, CIKIC, a dozen acronyms, and the patient's own cells are drawn out, cultured in a lab, and infused back. These are generally not written into the university hospitals' first-line protocols. They are not covered by insurance. A single session can cost several $100,000, so roughly a few thousand US. A full course can run into the millions of yens, the tens of thousands of dollars. Families often blur these two families together, because the marketing word is the same. I once watched a professor at a university hospital say, with the gentlest face I've ever seen on a physician, both are called immunotherapy. But their place inside the medical system is not the same. One is in the drawer of prescriptions I can reach for. The other is not in my drawer. I am not going to tell you it is wrong for a patient to choose the second if the patient has enough information. I am going to say clearly that instead of the standard of care is a different sentence from in addition to the standard of care. Once that has been fully pursued, the order of those two sentences matters. I translated that sentence from my chair in the corner, and I wrote it down in my notebook in Chinese, in Japanese, and then eventually in English. It comes out of my mouth now in 3 languages whenever I am asked. There's one patient I still think about. I will not say where he came from. Not Japan is all I will say. He did not trust the medical system of his own country. He had his reasons. They were his reasons, not mine. And it is not for me to weigh them. He landed in Fukuoka, and the first thing he said before anyone asked him anything was, no chemotherapy, no radiation. I want to be cured by cell therapy alone. From my seat in the corner, I stopped breathing for a second. I am not a doctor. I had no standing to argue about his treatment plan. The only job available to me in that room was to put his sentence accurately in front of the Japanese oncologist. I did that. The oncologist was a calm man. He sat with the sentence for a long time before he answered. I hear your wish. I have to tell you, though, that in the current framework of medicine, cell therapy is not positioned as a replacement for the standard of care. At most it is considered as a companion, an adjunct run alongside. If you place it at the center and the standard at the margin, the logic becomes very hard to defend. I want you to hear that clearly, so that whatever you decide is a decision you made with full information. The patient did not accept the framing. I will not write down what happened after. That belongs to him and his family, not to me. What I will write down is that our small office kept his medical records carefully, and that we kept asking every few weeks whether he would agree to see a medical oncologist for a second opinion, just so that a door we had opened remained open. That was almost the only thing a translator, could do, to keep the doors open. Never close a retreat route on behalf of someone else. 12 years in a corner chair does something strange to a person's curiosity. You begin to watch not the illness, but the shape of the attachments a person carries into the illness with them. When the bill came due at the end of that patient's visit, in the section that concerned my translation fee, a separate conversation opened up. I am not going to write down what it was about. What I will write down is that even at the edge of one's life, the private circuitry of a person's ordinary business mind keeps turning evenly. The way a small motor keeps turning after the main engine has cut out. I do not mean that as criticism. It is just what I observed. People are like that. The thing that patient taught me, the thing I want to set down plainly, is this: if a person does not trust the medicine of their own country, flying to a different country does not produce a different kind of medicine. It produces the same medicine in another language. The ceiling of what medicine can do is not lower in Taipei than in Fukuoka. It is not higher in Boston than in Seoul. There is one medicine and it has a ceiling, and you cannot buy a different ceiling by crossing an ocean. I never heard a doctor say that sentence out loud. I inferred it from watching their faces over many hundreds of consultations. The face a good oncologist makes when a family mentions a clinic in a third country. The slight slow blink, the pause before the reply. That face was my teacher. This section will be short because it is dry, and because my understanding of it is only the understanding of a layman who has had to ask many times. What is a CPC? Femi's. I used the explanation one researcher gave me, almost word for word. A CPC, a cell processing center, is a laboratory where cells are handled. The Regenerative Medicine Act, formerly the Act on the Safety of Regenerative Medicine, is about something else. It regulates the medical act of giving those cells to a patient. The two are not the same thing. A CPC certification speaks to the facility's cleanliness and equipment standards. A regenerative medicine filing speaks to the treatment plan itself. A clinic can be certified on one axis and not the other. The presence of one certificate does not imply the presence of the other, and neither certificate by itself is the same thing as the state guaranteeing that the treatment works. I am not a lawyer. I am not a regulator. I do not trust my own summary above to be correct in every detail. What I will say is that when a family asks me how to evaluate a clinic offering cell therapy, I tell them to ask, in two separate sentences, which CPC processes your cells and what is its certification status, and under which Regenerative Medicine Act is your treatment plan filed. If the clinic cannot answer cleanly or answers by changing the subject, the family has learned something useful for free. Please take any decision about such a clinic to someone qualified, a lawyer, a regulator, a physician not employed by the clinic itself. I have sat in a lot of beautiful clinics. Marble floors, leather armchairs, fresh flowers on the reception desk. A receptionist so polite she could be a concierge at the Park Hyatt. coffee poured from a silver pot, magazines on a walnut table. These places exist all over the expensive districts. Call them Clinic A and Clinic B and Clinic C. I am not going to name them, and in any case the point is not the individual clinic, but the pattern. The first time I walked into a clinic like that, I was impressed. I thought this must be where the real medicine is happening. Look at the details. These clinics do not, as a rule, have operating theaters. They do not have inpatient beds. They do not have emergency equipment. They do not have on-call physicians through the night. What they have is consultation rooms, an injection room, a blood draw station, and a menu of elective treatments, IV drips, antigen cocktails, cell infusions, the occasional specialized injection. High margin, quick turnover, no night shifts. A good business model if you're running a business. A medical problem shows up when the patient is not well. A case I sat with. The details have been blurred to protect the family. A patient received an elective treatment at one of these clinics in the afternoon. By evening, the fever was 39°C. The family called the clinic. The clinic was closed. There was no on-call line that connected to a person. The family called me. I told them to go to the nearest emergency department. They went. The emergency physician brought the fever down, wrote a short discharge note, and told them to follow up with their treating physician in the morning. The family called me again, confused. Why had the emergency department not done something? Because that is not what emergency departments in Japan are for. A Japanese emergency department stabilizes a patient, brings down the fever, controls the pain, prevents a crash, and then discharges the patient back to the care of the primary physician who is responsible for the original condition. The emergency department does not take over someone else's case in the middle of the night. It is not organized around that. It is not a failure of kindness toward foreigners. It is the architecture of the system. Which means that the afternoon at the beautiful clinic and the night at the emergency department are two different medical worlds that do not easily speak to each other. The patient's primary physician is the staff at the beautiful clinic. The staff at the beautiful clinic will not be at the clinic until tomorrow at 10 a.m. And even when they arrive, they may not have the capacity to manage an acute complication. They have no inpatient beds to admit the patient into. They have no operating theater to take the patient into. One of the physicians I have worked with for years said to me once, not inside an exam room, but afterward, over coffee, when you help a family choose a place to receive treatment, do not ask what the clinic can do for them on their best day. Ask who will be there for them on their worst night, and where, and with what tools. I've been quietly lending that sentence to families ever since. Japan has a detailed advertising guideline for medical institutions. A major revision in June 2018 removed the ability to show before and after photographs in most contexts, prohibited absolute claims like guaranteed cure and always safe, and tightened the use of patient testimonials. The ink was barely dry before the workarounds appeared. Instead of before and after photos, clinics publish bar charts labeled data presented at a conference without sample sizes. Instead of guaranteed cure, they write many patients report a significant improvement in quality of life without saying what many means. Instead of patient testimonials on the clinic's own site, the testimonials migrate to third party blogs, and aggregator sites that link back to the clinic. This is the gray zone the regulator cannot easily reach. When a family asks me how to read a clinic's website, I give them one line to skip the adjectives. Read the numbers and the proper nouns. The adjectives are noise. Groundbreaking, cutting edge, many, best. These words contain no information. What contains information? The Physicians Medical Society memberships and board certifications. The clinic's case volume for the specific condition, stated as a number per year. The full fee schedule, stated in yen, not in ranges like depending on the patient's situation. Vague pricing is almost always a warning. The named affiliated hospital for complications with an address. If those 4 items are present in specifics, the clinic at least respects its readers. If any are absent, the family should ask why out loud before booking anything. One more note on search engines, because families ask. Searching for immune cell therapy lung cancer on Taiwan Google returns on the day I tried it around 140,000 results. The first few pages heavy with paid placements. The same phrase on Japan Yahoo returned in the millions. The more commercial the topic, the more noise dominates the top of the results. The Signal Actual Studies and Society Guidelines sinks to page 4. A trick a nurse taught me once. Add the word PubMed to the search, or UpToDate, or NCCN, or 学会 AD Society Guideline, depending on the language. The noise collapses. What remains is closer to what a physician would read. I had a full company checkup every year. How did it get this far without anyone noticing? Every oncologist I have sat with hesitates before this question. It is a question about a promise the patient believed had been made, but that nobody remembers making. The answer I have heard most often goes something like, a health check finds within the organs that were examined, using the methods that were used, the kinds of abnormality those methods are capable of finding. It is not a machine for finding every disease at the earliest possible stage. It was never designed to be. Chest X-rays, tumor markers, fecal occult blood tests, each has its strengths and its blind spots. A chest X-ray is not as sensitive to small peripheral lung nodules as a low-dose CT scan. A fecal occult blood test picks up bleeding from the left side of the colon more reliably than from the right. A tumor marker in normal range does not mean nothing is wrong. A tumor marker above the reference does not mean something is wrong. Which test to do, at what interval, with what family history and age profile, is a conversation with a primary care physician, not a generic list in a memoir. But one thing I do want to say, because I have seen it matter. A negative health check is not a reason to ignore the signal your own body is giving you. I have been more tired than usual. I have lost weight without dieting. My bowel habits have changed and I do not know why. Those sentences have arrived earlier, in many cases I have watched, than any screening test. A doctor I respect once told a patient the body is the first instrument. Every test we do is only a second opinion on what the body is already telling you. Do not let a clean checkup talk you out of listening to yourself. Go back to the doctor. Ask a second time. I had a friend in Fukuoka, a man I had known for years through business, the kind of person who did his checkup every single year without fail. He called me one afternoon to say the diagnosis had come back and the stage had come with it, and the stage was late. I sat there with the phone against my ear and could not say anything useful. He chose in the end not to pursue aggressive treatment and went home to be with his family in Taiwan. I am not going to turn that into a lesson. Some things are not lessons. They are just what happened. If we come to Japan, where should we go? 12 years in the corner of exam rooms, and I have one answer to this plainly. When the condition is mild, a local clinic with a physician who knows you. When the condition is serious, when imaging or hospitalization or specialist care is required, a referral to a regional medical center or a university hospital. This tiered design is the spine of the Japanese system. A university hospital will charge an additional fee at first visit if you arrive without a referral letter, often several thousand yen. Sometimes around 10,000, which is roughly 30 to 70 US dollars depending on the year. The point of the fee is not to punish the patient. The point is that the outpatient clinic of a university hospital is structured around referred cases. Walking in cold is not what the system is for. Larger name brand hospitals, the university medical centers, the major cancer centers have one attribute I value very highly, and it is not technical. It is that they have reputations to protect. They have research to publish, rankings to worry about, media attention to absorb. The larger the institution, the higher the cost of a scandal. This does not guarantee perfect care. It does guarantee that cutting corners is a very expensive choice, and most institutions at that scale have concluded is not worth it. The small elective clinic in an expensive district faces the opposite calculation. If a small clinic's reputation collapses, the owners can rebrand and reopen under a new name within months. I have watched this happen, not a theoretical example. When I am helping a family evaluate a hospital, I look at three concrete things. The published case volume for the specific disease on the hospital's own official statistics page, not a marketing page. The statistics page. Every major Japanese hospital has one. The affiliations of the department head, whether they hold positions in the relevant national societies, whether they publish, whether their name appears on the guideline committees, whether the hospital has a dedicated international patient support office. If it does, the conversation is going to be dramatically smoother and the costs more predictable. If it does not, everything is harder and the family should budget their energy accordingly. Case volume first, reputation second. Case volume again. Reputations can be bought or manufactured. Case volume is harder to fake because it leaves paper trails across the whole system. The single most common thing I am asked after all these years is not really a medical question. It is a social one. I would like to get a second opinion, but I am afraid of offending our current doctor. Is it acceptable? It is more than acceptable. It is built into the system on both sides of the water. Second opinion, in the Japanese Kakanen, is a recognized step in both the Japanese and the Taiwanese systems. Physicians are accustomed to writing the referral letter. Some university hospitals run dedicated second opinion clinics precisely for this purpose. One medical oncologist I worked with put it this way, and I have never forgotten the phrasing: a second opinion is not a vote of no confidence in the treating physician. It is a way for the family to confirm the treatment plan with fresh eyes so that they can proceed with conviction instead of doubt. When a patient of mine asks for a second opinion, I write the letter gladly. The patient who has had a second opinion and come back is more at peace with the treatment than the patient who secretly wondered and never asked. I have translated that sentence into Mandarin dozens of times for dozens of anxious families, with one caveat. A second opinion is not the same thing as shopping for the answer you want. When one physician says this is difficult, and another says the same, and a third says the same, and the family keeps visiting a fourth and a fifth and a sixth, I understand that impulse. I understand it completely. The harder truth is that if 10 physicians converge on the same assessment, at some point the assessment has to be allowed in. Pushing for an 11th does not find a hidden door. It delays the grief. I am not going to rush anyone through that process. It is the heaviest time in a family's life. Nobody at my desk has any right to move them along faster than they can move. What I have noticed, though, after 12 years, the conviction a family arrives at is rarely reached through the medical evidence alone. It arrives by a different road. Through hours sitting in a hospital room with the patient while the afternoon light crosses the floor. Through an old story remembered. Through something the patient said 6 months ago that only makes sense now. The final settlement is almost never delivered by medicine. Medicine delivers you to the foot of it. The last step happens somewhere else. A second opinion is a stair in that climb, not the top. I could keep going. The notebook is thick, but let me stop. I want to repeat at the end what I said at the beginning. I am not a physician. Nothing in this chapter is my opinion. It is the echo of things certain doctors said to certain families on certain afternoons, passing through a translator's memory, bent slightly by the years. Another physician on another day about another patient would have said different words. Medicine in 226 is not medicine in 2E14. Some of what I heard in the corner in 20E14 is already out of date. Please take this chapter as a layman's notebook, nothing more. And please take any question about your own illness or a family member's illness to the physician who knows the case. One last thing. 12 years in the corner of exam rooms did not leave me thinking about the limits of medicine. It left me thinking about the texture of medicine. Data, numbers, protocols, journal papers, all real, all important, none of them the whole thing. What a particular doctor says to a particular patient on a particular afternoon, in which order, with which word, to which member of the family, with which silence in between, none of that is in any textbook. It lives only in the room between 3 people for a few minutes, and then it is gone. This chapter, like the rest of the book, is really about those rooms. A trembling voice on the phone. 3 seconds of silence after a diagnosis. The window of a hospital room at 4 in the afternoon in November, when the light comes in sideways and turns the blanket orange. The work of sitting with those things is not going to be automated away, whatever tools arrive. The physicians quoted in this chapter have not been named. The clinics have not been named. This chapter is a memoir, not medical advice, and not an endorsement or criticism of any specific institution or therapy. For any decision about your own care, please speak to your own physician. And then, if there is time afterward, have a cup of something with the person you love. And do not spend the cup talking about the illness. That is the end of this chapter. Thank you for listening. I will see you in the next one.